The public test realm for the upcoming patch, the Undermine, is officially live. With it, players get access to testing out several new tier sets, trinkets, and a bunch of other goodies. In this video, I want to talk about my experience and first impressions with the new dungeon, Operation Floodgate. Let's just dive right in. For the first time ever, or at least in a very long time, Blizzard is not only introducing a new dungeon in the middle of an expansion, but also having it available for Mythic Plus the same season it releases, and this is Operation Floodgate. Located in the Ringing Deeps, players who enter this dungeon will find themselves face to face with a horde of goblin machinery and mercenaries. This is a 4-boss dungeon with a pretty open floor plan, which could make for some pretty interesting routing. The idea is that you have to destroy these 5 crates of goblin weaponry before being able to activate the 3rd boss. 3 of those crates are located near the river, and 2 of them are locked behind bosses, both Big Mama and the Demolition Duo. Once you defeat both bosses and all 5 crates are destroyed, you're going to be able to take on Swampface, who blocks the entrance to the interior of the dungeon. Once Swampface is dispatched, your group will be able to enter the waterworks from this extremely natural entrance and head towards Geezle Gigazap, the final boss. But let's walk it back and talk about this dungeon. The first thing that really stood out to me were how few casts there were. Sure, there are still some deadly casts that the players must coordinate interrupts with, but most of it is avoiding things. Early on, you have abilities like Trick Shots, which is like a chain lightning type damage profile, along with some enrages, but nothing too crazy. You also have a lot of these loader bots that just spin and deal damage. What's slightly annoying though is that since they are mechanical, they are immune to things like Roar, Fears, Blinds, and etc. My favorite mob though in this dungeon has to be the Shredinator that spawns these massive blades. It's avoidable, but definitely scary. The Venture Co squad also has some of these pro Fortnite players who are going to speed build scaffolding, which makes them take significantly less damage when they're on top. Oh, and it's these things that you need to destroy. Just don't stand in the circle or you'll die. Also, this is being raved about online already, but the new swirl indicators are amazing. Blizzard definitely cooked, as the kids say. One thing you may also have noticed is the new Xalatath Affix orbs. How it works is that they rotate around each player, either clockwise or counterclockwise in a rotation, and another group member needs to soak your orb and vice versa. The most annoying and most dangerous mob in here though has to be this Dark Fuse Bloodworker. He does this super nasty channel that applies a healing absorb and does crazy damage during the channel. I can only imagine that we are going to want to skip as many of these as possible or pray that they get nerfed. Big Mama is the first of the 2 bosses you can go to, and quite simple, and I think most DPS players will probably enjoy this fight. At full energy, the boss will spawn 4 drones, which will cast a handful of mechanics, basically just dodge whirls and get kicks. If you're targeted by the sonic boom though, you're going to want to bait it away from your group, because anyone who's caught in it will be dragged along, silenced, and take a lot of damage. If the ads also live too long, eventually Big Mama will just start pulsing AoE damage and have a massive damage reduction, so ads are going to be the priority here. Once all 4 ads are defeated though, Big Mama needs a recharge, taking 200% increased damage for 12 seconds, while also doing some pretty heavy AoE damage. Once that phase ends though, it's back into ad cleave. Just watch out for the big patch of electricity on the floor after the phase ends. Once the boss is low enough though, you can just tunnel. Once you defeat Big Mama, you're going to find yourself heading across the river, which just has more trash you're going to need to defeat before getting up to the Demo Duo. You're going to encounter some Fortnite boys over here, as well as some surveyors. These mobs do some pretty dangerous damage with their dynamite casts, but more importantly, their surveying beam needs to be kicked. At the top of the stairs though, you're going to find 2 Shredinators, which can be either pulled together or separately. They aren't difficult by themselves, but if you have other mobs that get pulled in, it could get out of hand. After dispatching a few more enemy units, we were on to Keeza and Bront, the Demolition Duo. This is a 2-target cleave encounter with Bront being tanked and Keeza flying around the room. Basically just dodge beams and swirls, but shortly into the encounter, bombs are going to spawn and all of them need to be cleared. Luckily, they give us a way to do it. Keeza will debuff players with a heavy-hitting dot, but when it's dispelled, it'll deal damage and clear all bombs inside of its area. Bront, on the other hand, will begin a sequence of charges which will target 3 separate players. Any bombs in its path are going to be cleared from the area, so try to use his charge to clear as many bombs as possible. As long as you keep the area clear of bombs, it's a pretty simple fight. Just remember to keep their health as even as possible since they will enrage when their partner dies, gaining a ramping damage effect. Once you've destroyed all the crates, you can now head towards Swampface. You'll find yourself in the river, which has some of the easier trash in my opinion. These divers apply a pretty nasty bleed to party members, and they drop Sephorium bombs, which can just simply be avoided. The disturbed kelp though does some AoE damage shortly into the pool, but mostly just melees the tank. If you have a proper CC chain, you can actually lock these guys down pretty easily, but you're going to want to kick the restorative algae cast, which just heals them over time. Once the area is clear though, you want to plant these bombs to access the interior, but not before being challenged by Swampface. This is a sludge fist style fight, I guess is the best way to describe it, which is exactly what we needed in a Mythic Plus environment. Shortly into the fight, he will pair players together. If you move further than 14 yards away from your player that you're paired with, it'll grip those players together in the middle. It also does a fair bit of damage while the vines persist, so basically it's just a massive healer check. Throughout the fight, you will need to dodge frontals and waves, all while being paired with another random player. Blizzard is really dunking on pug groups in this one. Chances are, the rule should always be like dodge left or dodge right. I'm not sure which is better. With proper tuning, this fight can be an absolute banger in higher keys, and it'll probably be my favorite fight in here. Once you enter the interior of the facility, you'll just face off against Bubbles, who is a fish who does big scary damage to the group. I really like it when Blizzard has fun with these kind of mobs in a dungeon. But basically, he's going to do a frontal you'll need to dodge, as well as do a very nasty group debuff that your healer's going to have to deal with. Personally, I was soaking these bubbles that he spawned, as they didn't do too much damage to me on a 10, but I'm not sure if this will change. After the fish is fried, we'll actually see some similar mobs we saw up on the surface, with the jump starter being a fresh face. This mob is brutal, with constant ticking damage and swirls you're going to have to dodge every 4 seconds until he dies. Casters and healers, I'm so sorry. There isn't just one, not two, but 4 of these guys down here. Of course, you can skip this one for sure, because he is just asleep. But Blizzard is really trying to pull a Shadow Moon's burial ground with this dungeon by putting 2 of them right in front of the final boss. Classic. Once you finish this fairly linear hallway, you're ready to face off against the final boss, Geezle Gigazap. I'm not sure how I feel about this fight, honestly, because there's a lot going on for almost no reason. The encounter starts with him phasing just in front of his big machine contraption. Dodge these beams and your healers are going to need a big pump. Next, you're going to want to dodge swirls, and tanks, you're going to want to prepare for the Thunder Punch, which is currently humbling tanks everywhere with the amount of damage it deals. Geezle will then target 2 random players with Gigazap, which they want to move away from the water so they don't electrify it. Then shortly after that, Geezle's going to spawn Leaping Sparks, which will attempt to connect with players they are attached to. The way you remove this is by kiting them over the water pools that are currently not electrified. This is similar to M.O.M.M.A for anyone who did Dawn of the Infinite. Then he's going to reset his phase. The most annoying part about this fight though is definitely the heavy tank damage from the Tank Buster paired with the knockback. I learned pretty quickly that it's best to put yourself against a wall, because being in the wrong position will send you flying off the edge into the watery abyss below, or into an electrified puddle on the ground, which will stun you for 8 seconds. This definitely was an encounter we had to work through, but we did finally get it down. I've been so excited about this dungeon ever since they announced it. Being someone who is absolutely encapsulated by Mythic Plus, new dungeons just get me excited, and this one did not disappoint after my first experience. Of course, we had plenty of deaths and there were some obnoxious mobs, but Blizzard seems to be shifting away from the unmanageable amount of kicks that we saw in things like Stonevault or Arakara, and we are now focusing more on avoiding mechanics or kiting, which I'm all for. A lot of these mobs do have some interesting new abilities, and even if they aren't necessarily new, the new animations, the swirls, the particle effects, the visuals, all of them give this dungeon an insane amount of flavor. The boss design, though, is really where this dungeon makes its mark. All these fights are simple, yet enjoyable. Some of my favorite fights of all times have been the simpler fights. I can't speak for Pugs or for really anyone else, but this dungeon excites me even more so after playing it. Of course, I recognize some issues with Pug coordination on fights like Swampface, or the outrageous healing requirement for Geezle Gigazap, or clearing bombs on the Demolition Duo. But as first impressions go, I'm sold.